Welcome to our Wednesday webcast. This is, again, a good chance for us to connect and give you some information that's maybe helpful, some inspiration as well, some hope. The times can be rough, and I think that's important to let you guys know. We're also going to talk about adaptability, and there's a brand new Secure Act that's come out. We're going to talk about some of the ramifications and planning we're doing with that. So another thing we're going to do on this webcast is talk a lot louder. So if I'm blasting you out, you can actually turn the speakers down a little bit, as I know that's been something that you guys have said as well. Thanks again for your time and for joining us, and those for you who are watching later, I hope you enjoy this. A lot of what we're looking at right now is the hope and the despair. I saw a great show, basically, it was one of the TV shows, James Corden, if you know him, and he talked about this and gave some vulnerability. I want to give you an idea as well. During this time, you might feel hope, you might feel despair, you might feel encouraged, you might feel suffocated by being at home, you might feel lonely. All of these feelings that you're feeling, those are great things. Those are things you feel. Don't despair on those. It's okay to feel those. We feel them too. The difference that we find is we just know not to react to those. Today our society is very immediate about reacting, doing something about it. We take that like an old president who used to take and write a letter when he was quite angry. He'd write this whole letter out to somebody. He'd put it in his desk. He'd come back the next morning and review it and never send it. So for us, that's how we view these feelings. We get it, the hope, the despair, the fact that something is announced yesterday, that there may be more deaths than expected. We don't know where this is going. We don't know exactly where this is going by any means, right? But what we do know is the human tendency to project things out into the future and how we'll adapt to those. So those are a couple of the pieces that we want to talk about today. I think what's kind of interesting today is if you talk about despair, you're going to see somebody out there right now in the media. Bill Gates will talk about, listen, I talked about this 5 years ago. You need to take this very serious. And then on the other side of the equation, you might hear Elon Musk or somebody else say, oh, this is nothing. We'll get through it. So you start to see this kind of hope and despair cycle, even with the experts. If we look at 42 different experts that we have and we work with, there's 21 in each camp, on the hope side and the despair side. Hey, it's good. This is over. Hey, this is going to be bigger than we expect. So my question to you, as we look at it as well, is who do you trust? We trust planning. We trust the faith, patience, and discipline that has gotten us through the 2008 crisis, the 2000 crisis, and will get us through the fourth or fifth crisis we have in our careers as well. We don't know exactly what will happen here, and that's extremely important to know, but we do know that the hope that comes out of this is pretty amazing. For instance, reading and talking, Peter Diamandis, and I think I just sent you out a technology summary of the Abundance 360, and it's pretty amazing how in 2 months the world can change. So while we're there, we're talking about the hope of technology, everything that's going to happen from it, the great things it's doing. And what's incredible right now, as you start to look at it, in 13 days, I think, approximately, we identified a virus that, in comparison to the AIDS virus, it took 2 years to discover. We're able now to have people on a dime turn and to start working against this virus and finding cures for it, identifying it, finding vaccines that we've never seen before. The speed at which we are doing this is amazing. Artificial intelligence is a massive, massive help. 3D printing is actually turned to printing masks that were unavailable right now for our healthcare professionals. There's so many things occurring right now when it comes to technology and it comes to hope, if you will. What it does for us is it shows us, on my side of the equation, is I tend to look at the bright side of the equation. I understand both sides, but I tend to live on the side of the hope instead of in despair. Because what you're going to find is times like this is when people jump up and they donate food, they donate money, they put themselves at risk to get senior citizens in their neighborhood food. The thing that you're not going to find covered heavily on the news are the great stories. The people doing concerts like Live Aid, but they're doing them now in their living rooms. People donating their time for things like that for entertainment for us. It's amazing to see those things come up, and there's many, many more. Tonight, one thing as well, in honor of your healthcare professionals, on your doorstep, many neighborhoods around the nation are putting a candle out as a vigil, or a luminary, if you will, out on their doorstep to really recognize support for those medical and healthcare professionals. Think about this. Thank you, first of all, to all of our medical care professionals. We have quite a few. Thank you for both you, your spouses, your children, everybody who's helping out right now. You're the heroes right now as we see it. The key with us, though, as we look at this, is how interesting would that be? Just think about this. You are going to a third shift at 11 o'clock at night, and you see every house along the way with a candle supporting who you are. That's gratitude. That's the hope that occurs. That's the greatness that comes out of people when this happens. I'm kind of a voracious study of history. You can see by some of the books and things we see and read. But if you look at this has really been studied as well. Dan Sullivan lately said it. If you look at history, these kind of crises are the things that propel us massively in a forward direction. We may actually now be looking at healthcare leading us out of this economy. We may be looking at technology helping us with this healthcare issue. So these are the things that happen. These are the kind of crises, that you will, that America has had consistently since its inception, that we have been through. And many of you have been through similar crises before. So I just want to make sure that you know that. That's perspective to many of you. We've had a couple conversations too with younger clients or our clients' children. But it's interesting. If you're a millennial right now, this is the first correction you've been through. I want you to understand it's okay to feel hope, despair, thinking I've been working really hard and now is this what it's all about? And feeling, is this all just going to be taken away from me? These are things that are natural because it's your first experience. This is unknown. It's even okay to feel, if it's your third or fourth experience, that you're going to feel that. We may actually have another time in this market correction where it tests the lows, because this is a barometer of human fear that happens, the markets are, in a very quick basis. But as a younger person, the questions we're also getting are, should we be investing in our 401k still? Should we just move it all to bonds and wait this one out? And the answer from us is a resounding no. If history is any guide, the answer is no. It's okay to feel this. It's okay to feel this. What we do is separate the reaction and make it a response instead. So just to give you some perspective and offer that to you, we know we've got an audience of many different ages, from those of you who are maybe well into the octogenarian category to probably even somewhere in the 20s, late 20s category. So we just want to make sure we're talking to all of you in these as well. This is designed to be something that is timeless. I know a lot of you we're finding something very interesting. A lot of you tune in for about 15 to 17 minutes. Either that's our attention span, or you get to a point where you've heard what we've said before. Today we're going to have some more timely things when it comes to the CARE Act, and we're going to have some planning issues that goes with those. But I do want to reiterate, this wisdom and long-term aspect of how we operate is very, very important. And I think it's a very good point for us right now to give you a who we are. And this is just to kind of reiterate who we are. And I think messages to always get across. You'll see this in our literature. It's going to become like the corrections as well, because I think you need to understand, and I think we all need to understand, most of you know this, but I'm going to read some of these to you as well. First of all, we're not market timers. We never have been, we never will be. If there's any timing in the market, it's been luck. Okay, so we look at this as, when things are cheap, you should buy. I can't tell you when the bottom is coming or when the next top is coming as well. The next one is, we cannot control the future because there are no future facts. Everybody who's doing all these predictions, like for instance, the gentleman came out just yesterday, I think it was the gentleman who was the head of fixed income from BlackRock, and said, this is over. We're pretty much, we think this is done. And then you get Gundlach, who comes out here, who's a big bond manager, says, nope, there's more despair. Now that might be natural because he invests in something that's a whole lot more secure, and he has, so you're looking at these experts having completely different opinions. So for us, there's no future facts. All these predictions are interesting, but none of them are knowable. So you can claim on to either one you want, but we don't claim on to either one. We're just going to adapt to what occurs. The next as well is our planning is our guide, and I think our value as well. So when you look at the adaptability that you have when you set a plan, and things that need to change, things that you've changed income, you'll change allocations a little bit, you'll rebalance when we need as well. You'll maybe put the wishes and wants off, which are pretty impressive to do as well. But that's what it requires in these times. That adaptability is probably the single biggest word you're going to find repeated over and over in this case, because that's what we do as Americans. That's what you are doing as well, and we're recommending to us is let's adapt. And we'll talk more about that piece as well. When we set a plan in action, there's one thing for sure. The world is volatile and changes will happen. Change is constant. We start with a plan, and then immediately things happen. You bought your house. You didn't plan to put a water heater in. You didn't plan to redo the roof in 4 years. You didn't plan for all sorts of things that occur. You didn't plan for that health setback. So we got to look at these things as, remember, this either happens for you or it happens to you. Very, very important for us to know. We classify this as the stuff that happens for you, and you can learn from it. You can be the victim and say it happens to me, but that's really a choice by you as well, and us. Another one is the change is constant. We live in a VUCA world. Volatile, unchanging, volatile, uncertain, changing, and ambiguous. So these are very, very constant, and the only thing that is sure is change. Another one is mindsets are critical. For instance, let me give you 3 samples, and I'll define them at a later time. Faith, patience, and discipline. Faith, is faith in the future. As history is some guide, we have faith that we will get around this. Unfortunately, there will be some massive issues, and that will affect our lives, every one of us. It's already doing it now, but we'll know somebody who this disease affects, and that's very disappointing. And we say a prayer to you and anyone in your family who actually has something at COVID now, or is suffering some of the consequences of what it does to individuals. Patience. The patience to get through this. This may not be over in a single month. It may be over in 6 months. It may not be over in 8 months. We don't know the answers to that, but that's the patience to get through it. We know the plans that we have are laid well and firm, and we'll adapt to them. The last one is a discipline. Discipline is hard. One thing I want to tell you about what I'm telling you here is the plans and what we do are simple. They sound simple because we take wisdom and we apply them to you. What is really true is it's simple, but it's not easy. It's very important to know. We make simple statements because those are truisms. Those are wisdom, right? But the key is it's not easy to do. We understand it, we get it. It's hard to be patient now. It's hard to be disciplined right now. You feel like you want to take control. When a human being feels that they have no control, that's the worst situation that they're in, especially to a lot of people who've used to being in control in their jobs. So in this scenario, when people are lacking control, we want to make sure people are, okay, good. Some things that you can do is be patient, have the discipline not to make massive changes, and have faith in the future. Those are really 3 things that are very important. This is also another one. Corrections will happen. They're happening right now. But over time, corrections will happen. That's also a very strong known factor. We'll talk more about those at a future time. But knowing what is truly important to you and what inspires you is key. So if you look at this today, you can concentrate on a couple things. You can concentrate on what's important to you and what really inspires you, or you can concentrate on what makes you angry and depressed. So spend more time, if you will, in the inspiration and the hope and what's important to you. We'll talk more about those here in a little bit. But I just wanted to give that to you kind of as a basis for who we are and what we do. There's more, but I want to give you maybe 6 or 10 straightforward facts about who we are, what we do, and how we can manage with the discipline that we do now, what we do. Our whole team believes this. All of us understand and know this as well. So what I want to do here at this point is kind of shift gears for a moment, because one thing you're finding is a word called adaptability. There's 3 words that are key in this presentation. One is hope and despair. 2 different sides of the equation. We tend to want to be on the hope side of the equation. We understand the despair that exists, and we understand that, and don't get us wrong. We don't say don't feel it. You can obviously feel that as well, but spend more time on the hope side. The second one is going to be adaptability. And right now, it's what our government is attempting to do. They learned some great things in 2008, learned some great things in 2000, but they're attempting to adapt right now to a scenario that was really not predicted, and it was very volatile and uncertain. So you're going to see some things that occur. Right now, we just had an act pass as well, the CARES Act. And what it does is it gives us some incredible opportunities here. I want Zach and Ken to talk about. Zach will give you some of the facts about it. Ken will give you some of the planning opportunities about that as well. So I'll turn it over to them for a moment.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And this act that Chris mentioned is the CARES Act, which stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And we're really analyzing this one, and it's the adaptability that Chris mentioned as well, because as most of you know, we just recently brought up the Secure Act that went into effect in December of last year and officially went into effect at January 1st of this year. So we're looking at the interplay of short-term decisions with this new CARES Act that we're talking about today, and also long-term planning ideas and decisions of the future as well. And so the main CARES Act, there's a lot in this one. It's confusing. There's a lot of different facts about it, but the main ones we're going to talk about are the rebates that we've heard, the penalty-free withdrawals from IRAs, employer-sponsored retirement plans, or a mix of both. Loans from qualified plans have changed if you still have a qualified plan out there or contributing to one. RMDs are forgiven for 2020, and Ken's going to talk through the impact of Roth conversions, QCDs, and then there's also a few changes to charitable giving. The way in which we get deductions for giving certain type of gifts, whether that's through cash or securities. Some of those deduction limits on those have changed as well. And then a couple miscellaneous items, expansion of healthcare coverage for HSAs, flexible spending accounts have expanded to combat the coronavirus effects on families. Federally backed mortgages, there's a couple interplay there where you can change that, and also federal student loans. For those of you that have those with kids or grandkids with those, there's a few changes and a little bit of forgiveness and a little bit of leeway as far as interest payments over the next 6 months or even a year out. So those are the main ones we'll talk about. We'll start at the very top with the rebates. As most of you have heard, this provides payments to taxpayers, and this was a $2 trillion fiscal stimulus. This was absolutely massive, which allows for a credit of $1,200 per individual, $2,400 per married couple filing jointly, and there's also a $500 credit per child under the age of 17. The payment is reduced after a certain threshold, and that's $75,000 for filing singly, $112,500 for head of household filing, and $150,000 for joint filers. This has a completely phase-out limit for those of you that made over $99,000 on your 2019 tax return or your 2018 if you didn't file your 2019 yet. $146,500 for head of households, and $198,000 phase-out for joint filers. And a lot of the questions we have heard from clients as far as hearing this on the news is, when can we expect to receive this? We're not 100% sure. We're hearing different things, but we're assuming that the credit will arrive in April through direct deposit in most cases. But again, that could be delayed a little while. But Ken, you had a couple ideas as far as what that could be used for.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. What I've heard on the phone from a couple of you is that I see two sides here. On one hand, this is fantastic for those families who need this, who are going through a very tough time right now, who have been potentially laid off from their position. And on the other hand, I've heard, you know what, it's meant for these people. We're okay over here. So if you do get the check and you need it, obviously use it for what you need for your family. If you get the checks and you don't necessarily need them, a couple ideas that we came up with was make a contribution potentially. You know, think about contributions, whether it's your 401k, IRAs, Roth IRAs, personal accounts. Make a contribution and help your future out. Also, establish an emergency fund. Some of you have plenty of cash. Some of you could really use to replenish that a little bit and bulk that up a little bit. I also heard some contributions to 529 college savings plans as well. So helping out the grandkids, the kids, for their future and their education as well. So those are some of the things that we've heard on the use for these rebates that are coming to you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. And if we're moving on to number 2, the second one that we talked about is penalty-free withdrawals from IRAs, employer-sponsored plans, or a mixture of both. If you're under the age of 59 and a half and are substantially impacted by the coronavirus, you can take up a coronavirus-related distribution up to $100,000. And there's different qualifications. So if this applies to you or know somebody that is affected health-wise to the coronavirus, you want to make sure that the limits and the definition applies to you. But it avoids the 10% early distribution penalty for taking out of your IRA before 59 and a half. The important thing to note is it still counts as ordinary income, but there's a few changes that you'll want to talk to your tax advisor about on when you can pay those back. We've heard some things that you can elect to include all of the income from the coronavirus distribution in 2020, or you can spread it out over 2020, 2021, or 2022. So there's a lot of interplay there, but it's the idea that the government looked at this, and if your family's impacted or you're impacted by the coronavirus, there are options from where you can take from. Another one, if we're moving on to number 3, is loans from qualified plans. If you still have an employer-sponsored retirement plan like a 401k or 403b, normally they allow loans up to 50% of the vested balance and not exceeding $50,000, but the limit has been raised substantially to 100% of the vested account balance up to $100,000. So this is just another example of the government's looking at things in places where we can take funds to help out during this time if you or a family member are impacted. And the fourth, and maybe the biggest one that applies to most of you, is RMDs being forgiven, and the impact that has and the questions that has with Roth conversions, the impact of those Roth conversions, can we still take them, QCDs as well? And required minimum distributions for qualified holders are waived for 2020. And that includes those of you that have an inherited IRA and have to take required minimum distributions from those as well. And Ken has a few points and a few questions that we've went through and seen and the impact and the planning on those as well.
Yeah, a few points on the waiver of the required minimum distributions for 2020. We have some clients that are what we call auto RMD calculations. That means on the first of the year, our system will help you calculate what you should be taking out on a monthly basis for your previous year's RMD amount that you need to take out. So for those of you who need it, of course, continue on with that. For those who are looking at your spending patterns and be like, you know what, if we could suspend these for a little while, that would be a good idea. Let us know who you are on that situation. We'll be able to accommodate, give you the advice that you need. So just take a look at your spending patterns on that piece. The other one is now that the waiver of the RMDs that are out there, again, it goes back to conversion planning. So remember the last time we talked about there was a pecking order that we need to be doing. So qualified charitable distributions are number one, required minimum distributions are number two, and then finally we can get to the Roth conversion. The conversion is above and beyond what the required minimum distribution would have been. Now that those are waived, we can get to the conversion sooner if that makes sense. Again, it goes back to the spring, is that right now the spring is compressed, and that's in our traditional IRA. If we slide the money over to our Roth IRA, pay the taxes that are due on that, when the spring decompresses and pops back up, historically it's done that, the money is going to be in your Roth IRA. The earnings on that and the recouping of your money is on that. Now it's in your Roth IRA, not taxed, versus having it still in your traditional IRA. That's what a conversion really is. Now we can get to those quicker because we don't necessarily have to go through the RMD process first. So some of you who were thinking about taking your required minimum distribution and you may not necessarily want those this year because of the waiver, now it's a time to look at that conversion. So if we would have take out $20,000 for the year, maybe we look at a $10,000 conversion, a $15,000 or even a $20,000 conversion, because from a tax standpoint, the money would have come out anyways. Maybe we just put the money in a favorable position for your family's future. That's an idea there. Also, qualified charitable distributions, the QCDs that a lot of you do, that has not changed. That is still in place. You need to be 70 and a half years of age to be qualified for the qualified charitable distribution. Mm-hmm. You have to be literally 70 and a half years of age or older to make those qualified charitable distributions.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Ken. That's awesome.
And one question we received as well in RMDs, if we took it at the beginning of the year,
right,
what can we do then if we don't need that money? And the answer is that it can be treated as a distribution, and the 60-day indirect rollover can apply where we can put it back in, but we have to be really careful with that. And we'd have to talk about that on a one-on-one basis because we'd have to make sure that we didn't have any other type of 60-day indirect rollover within the last year.
Right.
So it's the idea that there's still options if we already took it before this act came out. Mm-hmm. And the next couple we'll go through very quickly. They might not apply to each and every one of you, but it's the idea that this is in there. And one of those is the charitable giving through cash. If you're giving to charities through cash, it used to be an adjusted deduction of up to 60% of your adjusted gross income, and temporarily it's now 100% of adjusted gross income. So if you give through cash, it's the idea that you want to talk to the person that you do taxes through and how that impacts you or could impact you moving forward. The last couple we'll just briefly touch on is just the expansion of healthcare coverage. HSAs, flexible spending accounts, are now able to be used for a few other items. Some of those even over-the-counter prescriptions that previously weren't under HSAs or flexible spending. So you want to take a look at that if you have those and receive any medications that weren't previously covered by HSAs. Federally backed mortgages. If you have a mortgage that is federally backed, provision allows you to spend payments up to 12 months. This may not apply to everyone, but it's the idea that this is in there. And if it applies to you, to find out a little bit more. And also just a relief for student loan borrowers as well. That's the last item that we have in here today. And during this time through September 30th, 2020, no interest will be accrued on this. At least that's the information that we're getting now. This could be subject to change, but it's the idea to look at that too, that there might be a little bit of a window the next 6 months where no interest is accrued to either stop payments or even increase payments because we're not having interest on those as well. We'd be paying more principal during this time.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I'm going to jump in here, Zach. Also, it seems like there's a 60-day window for 0% interest rates on federal loans as well, beginning March 20th of this year. Again, some ideas around that. If there's 0% interest, maybe taking a look at if you have credit cards that are out there that are 8 to 12% that are accruing interest. Maybe take a look at shifting money temporarily from loans that are at 0% right now to higher interest rate credit cards that are potentially out there as well. So that's another piece that goes along with that as well. So
Awesome. There's a ton of planning that goes with this. This is not the last act that's going to come from this. It's one of the first ones that's come from it. So there'll be a lot of adaptability that goes with that. A few of the questions we're getting to, is we'd like to answer those from you, is what industries might lead us out of this? Well, in this case here, it might be medical industry. We might start to see technology really push forward in this, because it's a lot of what's helping us not just identify but resolve this crisis right now. You're seeing also like Chrysler starting to print face masks and gowns. So everybody's really jumping in to help the healthcare professionals do what they need to do in a better way, because we had a complete obliteration of all the supplies that we had and needed. So we weren't necessarily prepared for that. What different industries are doing? Warren Buffett is right now looking at the hospitality industries and looking at those as potential places to loan. He has $128 billion in cash, so he has his own stimulus plan, but he's going to make a capitalistic opportunity out of that piece as well. Some of the questions we get, will I lose all my distributions and money? It's surprising to us sometimes, even longtime clients have that opinion. Am I going to lose everything I have? I tell you, the way the system operates here, you're going to find that's probably not the case. The way we have it set up, we've got different buckets set up. The probably not the case is if the market went to zero, well before that would happen, we'd have a lot of other shutdowns that people would need to be concerned with. I won't go down that catastrophist aspect, but we have a lot of preparation set up for times like these where there's cash in buckets that we can use. So the distributions are also designed to get through times like these. That's important for you to know. What are we doing right now? We're spending a ton of time talking with Ed Slott, bringing in a lot of the data that he has, a lot of our experts as well. We're calling, we're reading, we're teaching, we're counseling, we're planning, we're adapting, we're providing hope. The most important thing is giving you perspective to provide you hope that we'll get through this, and everybody is saying that. It may get old to be said, but we will get through this together. We'll adapt, and we'll make it sure we are prepared to do the planning with all the acts and tax aspects that are going on right now and keep you informed. We're going to give you a full summary of the Tax Act as well, so that's another piece, but we really wanted to hit some highlights here when it comes to the planning. Let me jump to one other thing here, and that's kind of, if you looked at right now some things that would be really brilliant, we were talking about this as well. What if I could find my grandfather's diary from the Great Depression every single day of what happened, or once in a while how he felt, or my grandmother felt? That to me would be true wealth right now. The only way for your future generations to get that is for you to begin to pen that now. Feelings of despair, feelings of hopelessness, feelings of opportunity. Hey, I've listened to a great podcast and now I feel great. That's us. I'm joking there. A little bit of self-serving. But the whole point is put down how you're feeling now to give them a reality, and also remind yourself of how you feel during this as well. I think it's really, really important for that piece. I think as well, if you'd like to help a lot of the healthcare workers out there, put out that support with some of the luminaries or candles outside tonight to let them know that you're supporting them as well. I think that's very important. The one thing I'd say is be the change. With the hope and despair, you have a choice. You have a choice to look at all the negative news, which there is tons of out there, and that dominates the news. Look for the hope. You'll have to dig for it under all the despair, but look for the hope. There's a ton of hope with medical. Basically, Peter Diamandis has some great stuff coming out about the medical. You're going to find some great stuff. Bill Gates will have some great comments about it. But look for what's going on that's good as well. Look at companies completely adopting, taking plants that were actually here in the Milwaukee. We actually had the Archdiocese gave a whole wing of of one of their abbeys that was not being used to the homeless, to keep them from getting sick during this time frame as well. There's incredible things going on, but that was about a 30-second jolt in the news. It was not the head story. Those are out there. Please look for them. More importantly, be the hope. Be the change. Try to eliminate despair for somebody else. Help somebody out in your neighborhood that needs it, but more importantly too, help by calling one of the relatives or friends or maybe just acquaintances who's there by themselves. Because in this kind of environment, when they're there in loneliness, it's a very, very big part of what's going on as well. So as we look at this, we'll make this a little shorter today. We'll probably talk more about different items and maybe give you little jolts of hope during the week. But a couple of important things I think that we wanted to do was really give you some perspective, what's going on with the CARE Act. As more comes out about that, we'll do more on that piece as well. let us know what's important to you. Please give us feedback, because we don't want to sit here and just talk about things we think are important. You may have heard this stuff several times. These are fundamental issues. We will continue to go over those because the fundamentals are what makes people great. You become great investors by learning and understanding and getting through times like this as well. You're paying the price for a ride, which is a future time. I think what's important to know is that that price has an expense. There's some sacrifice to it. And the future ride is the market that typically comes out the other side of this, is a phenomenal market like we had from 2008 as well. So be prepared for that. You understand you're paying for that price now to get the returns of stocks. So it's a very interesting time as we run through as well. Most importantly, we're here for you. We'll make phone calls to you. We're keeping ourselves healthy and prepared. We're keeping our social distancing, as you've seen as well. But most importantly, it's great to have, and I'm very thankful and grateful for the team that we have here that's really, really, really kind of hunkered down and say, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to make phone calls, we're going to reach out, we're going to answer phone calls, we're going to answer issues on a consistent basis. So they've really done incredible, and I really want to give them great credit as well. Also you. You guys have been phenomenal, and you continue to be as well. Make sure you let us know if you want to touch base for a quick phone call, or just even an inspiration, or whichever we'll do. And if you'd like, I would send out small inspirations on a day-to-day basis of different items that I see, if that's helpful to you. Because I do know inspiration, just like vitamins, goes away. It's there for a short time, and then you need more. So hope and inspiration needs to be fed. So I feel very passionate about America, the great things that are happening now, but they need to be brought to the forefront. If I'm one that does it for you, great. If somebody else does, great. I'm not concerned with that, just that it is brought to you as well. So thank you tremendously for today. Thank you for your faith, patience, and discipline with us, your adaptability. This is something we're going to work on and plan together, because right now the most important thing that we do for you is offer you perspective and planning with these events that are occurring. So we want to thank you as a team. We want to thank you for your trust in us. We want to thank you for being clients. But most importantly as well, we want to thank you for something that you're going to do for somebody else that makes this situation better. Thank you very much.
Thank you.